I'd like to welcome to the program this morning Dean Wendy York from the Wilbur and Ann Powers College of Business at Clemson University. Dean York, thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, my pleasure.
It's hard to believe it's been 3 years since you have come to the College of Business here at Clemson, and I'm just excited to be back in the room podcasting with you.
Yes, it's so wonderful to be with people in 3D now, isn't it?
It definitely is. I guess the most obvious question is you have led through a pandemic over the last few years, and I'd love to know, you have such a tremendous background in business and in leadership, and I'd just like to go there first. What have you learned leading through a pandemic?
Well, as you know, leadership is a passion of mine, and I've had the privilege during the pandemic to lead 2 different classes that I actually taught, the first university classes that I've taught on leadership, because I think leadership is such an important thing for our students to learn regardless of what their major is. Mm-hmm. And I say to them, leadership is a choice, not a title. You don't wait till you're president or dean to be a leader. So we were actively really cultivating leadership in these students. And it was a very interesting time to be leading, because in my classes academically, what I say is you need to know what your value system is as a leader before you hit a crisis. Mm-hmm. And your organization needs to understand those values too. And really those values are what we call culture. And you really have to set the culture of your organization before you hit a crisis, because when a crisis hits, you don't have time to figure out how you're going to handle things. And so I was really very, very grateful that I had been in place almost 1.5 years before the pandemic hit, because I'd had time to come in and establish myself with my team to really kind of show them how I lead and what I expect of them. And the team had really come together. I'm really very proud of all the department chairs and then the dean's staff team. And so we did have a working team before the pandemic hit. So when it did hit, people knew how to act. They knew how to feel comfortable in our culture, even though we didn't know what the answers were. We had no idea in March of 2020 that we would still be 1.5 years into this and still smiling every time we say, now we're coming out of it. But the very first lesson I learned going into the pandemic was the importance of the leader being willing to make a decision when you don't have the answers. Mm-hmm. You don't have the information, you don't have the answers. So very early on, really in early March, before we even had been sent home, I was having people come to me and say, we have conferences planned that we're traveling to in April. We have things that we're planning for this. What should we do? And I had to make a decision to say, go forward with that or don't go forward with that. Mm-hmm. And I took, at the time, what was a fairly draconian statement. And I said, I want everything canceled through the end of April 2020. We were the beginning of March. And for some people, that was like, really? And I just said, cancel everything through the end of April. Mm-hmm. Shortly after that, the university came out and canceled everything through March. And I kind of expected to get a backlash from people going like, wow, you panicked and were over. And what I found was a really interesting lesson for me as a leader. People do not do well in uncertainty. Mm-hmm. And they would rather have the leader make a decision, even with imperfect information, and even if it turns out to be the wrong decision, which this didn't turn out to be, but they would rather have a decision than live with that uncertainty. Mm-hmm. And actually, people were very, very good about it. And they said, okay, thank you, now we know what to do. Mm-hmm. So that was a really big, interesting, reinforced lesson for me as a leader, that you have to be brave enough, really, to make those decisions when you don't have information.
Which is so often the case in business anyway.
Right.
It's not a pandemic necessarily, but so many times you don't have all the information. You have to
You never have all the information, because you never have the information until you're on the other side of it. Mm-hmm. But so that was a very big leadership lesson for me. I was also, as I said, really so thankful that I'd had a chance to model the kind of values that I use as a leader, so that when we went into this totally uncharted water, people already knew how I act. And so they didn't know what was happening, but they knew they could trust me.
Right.
They knew that I would be truthful with them.
Mm-hmm.
They knew that I would tell them if I didn't know, and that I would pass on to them anything I could.
Mm-hmm.
And so we already had that kind of basis of trust. And I think that made that uncertainty a little bit easier for people. And then the next big lesson I learned in that line was the importance of communication. Over-communicate. We should probably do that all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But when there's uncertainty, if you don't fill in that hole, somebody will fill it in with something that seems very creative at the time. So that was an important one.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a really interesting insight about a year into it with students as well. You know, we think of them as so technology enabled and always have their face in a screen, et cetera. And you would think, and I think all of us felt like, oh, cool, I can roll out of bed in my jammies and go to a meeting or go to a class. And what I found over time, what I experienced, and I think is true for most of my faculty, after a while, students really want that high-touch environment, and they wanted the bumpers of that little bit of discipline and structure around them. There's something about going into class and having the instructor say, hey, I missed you last week, or you don't look like you feel good today. How are you? Or great job on that paper. They're really still pretty young, and they really needed that kind of sense of somebody else being in control then. And so it's been a really interesting lesson, and we learned some really important things from COVID and basically delivering education during that time, which we're going to carry forward and kind of take the best of both worlds.
I love that. So taking forward lessons learned, best of both worlds, it definitely has, I think, given a lot of organizations areas where they can improve on, save revenue, cost, and so forth.
And particularly in academia, I think we accelerated our learning probably fast forward about 5 years when we would have gone kicking and screaming in the past. So I know that this was a very hard transition, very hard on our faculty. They're very tired. Everyone's still very tired. But technology is here to stay, and there really are some important things that we learned out of that, and we will continue forward with that.
You spoke about leadership, and it sounds like you've really enjoyed being in the classroom, being with students and guiding them and helping them prepare for the future as leaders. What's your thought about growing someone as a leader, or whether leaders are just more naturally gifted in that way? I'm just curious to know your thoughts there.
Well, I think that there are some people that are more, quote, naturally leaders. In that, I mean, they do manifest as things we think about leadership, which for the most part has an awful lot to do with a good, healthy combination of confidence and empathy. A really good leader has a high confidence level, but a high level of empathy and love for other people. And so what I view in terms of teaching students leadership, teaching anyone leadership really, is first to tell them that they can do it, second to tell them they ought to do it, and third to build that confidence in them so that they do it. And so I really taught those classes really because I wanted to understand what my faculty were going through and what the students were going through. So the first class was totally online. The second class was hybrid. And I can tell you from all 2 of the university courses I've taught, it's a lot better to teach in person. The energy and the interactivity is a lot better. But still, yes, I think that leadership can be taught. And it's obviously a passion point for mine. And I've made it one of our signature programs, which is a program that sits on top of the other majors in the college and is really talking about this path toward developing yourself as a leader. And we actually are getting approval for it, and we expect to get final approval this December, and it actually will go on a student's transcript.
Wonderful.
Because it will be a CHE, a Committee of Higher Education approved certificate, and only those and majors and minors can go on a student certificate. So I think it's a wonderful program that is really focusing on, they start generally about the beginning of their sophomore year and then take courses in their sophomore, junior, and senior year, a combination of really academic classroom type learning combined with experiential hands-on learning.
Mm-hmm.
Along this concept of learning to lead yourself, learning to lead others, learning to lead teams, learning to lead managers, learning to lead leaders, learning to lead change.
Mm-hmm.
And we've piloted the program. A couple of the classes I taught were pilots for it, and then I have a director in charge of the program. He piloted last spring. We had our first introductory class this fall. Over 40 students signed up for it,
mm-hmm.
and they're now starting to sign up to follow it through in the spring. And they don't go as a cohort based. It's very flexible, so
mm-hmm.
students can come in and out of it. But our goal is to have as many students go through that leadership certificate program as they take kind of a mindful, personalized path of how they're developing themselves as a leader.
I love how you have come out of the business world with this fresh perspective. And part of what you have done is chosen to step into the classroom and have that front row seat with students and really see what their responses are, what their interests are, what their and teach and share with them. I always think as a dean that really informs a lot of what you do, even fundraising efforts. I would think that gives you a greater, broader perspective as you approach your job.
Well, it really wasn't on anybody's radar that I was going to teach right now. I did it as a response to, we had a bunch of students pulled back from their international programs when COVID hit, with third-party providers who refused to return their money, but also refused to give them credit. So we had students coming up some short with units they needed to graduate.
Mm-hmm.
So that was kind of my response to, hey, let's put a class together
Mm-hmm.
that they can take units if they need to. It's a passion topic for me.
Sure.
And the students that were there really wanted to be there,
Mm-hmm.
which is really wonderful. I suspect it's very different, if I had to teach a general ed class that was, something 101 and the kids may or may not want to be there, which should probably be better that I wasn't teaching that class because I probably hadn't mastered the 101 class either. But the leadership class is something I'm passionate about, and they seem to really get a lot out of it too.
Mm-hmm.
And I found out I just love teaching students. I always have known I loved being with students.
Yes.
They are the reason that we are there.
Yes.
It gave me a bigger perspective and heart for what my faculty go through.
Oh, yes.
Because I love my faculty too. And they really have been the unsung heroes in the middle of all of this story.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like it was just a pleasure for me. It is a pleasure for me. I speak often to student groups because I really view that one of my biggest roles in the college for students and faculty, in addition to setting a vision that will take us really forward, my job is to be an encourager.
Yes, ma'am.
I am there to be an encourager of my students and dare them to be great. I am there to try to fight tooth and nail to get my faculty what they need. I'm there to listen to the alumni who are so passionate and proud of their college.
Yeah.
Every one of them says to me, I wouldn't have gotten in now. And I said, yeah, I feel the same. I feel the same way about my colleges too. But they're such big supporters.
Yeah.
And it's just, we just have this little love fest going on at our college.
I think we do too. I do have to ask you though, since you brought that up, how, I hope you don't mind, but how do you feel like students have fared? Because this has been difficult for students, sometimes in isolation.
Oh, yeah.
I think we always, love our students and want them to do well, in their academic endeavor, but personally and psychologically. What thoughts do you have there?
I think when we finally get on the other side of this and there's enough time for people to do formal trained research, we're going to find out everybody hurt during this time. Even those of us that were not struck with a tragedy in our families, everybody has been under mental strain. And I think the students have too. And as you know, I have 3 daughters in college. I have three daughters that are seniors in 3 different institutions. And so I've got my 3 lab, my real life lab points that I take. And they're tired too. They've done well. I'm very proud of them. But like all students, they are just tired. And I have 2 that are definitely going to graduate school, and both of them have politely informed me that they're going to take a gap year after this. And I say, great.
Yes.
Just rest and heal and breathe deeply, and I'm okay with that.
Absolutely.
Our students are definitely enjoying being back in the building, and I really applaud President Clemens and the administration for making it such a priority that we get back into our classes in fall. And any of the students I've talked to and said, is it better to be in your jammies on class online or back in the classroom, even if you have to wear a mask? And they'll say, back in the classroom.
Wonderful.
They're social. People are social creatures. We need that.
Each other.
We need that. Yeah.
I appreciate it as well. The request for a pandemic report or commentary by faculty, and just, I guess, someone's looking at the qualitative information as well to see how people fared, how it affected their teaching, how it affected a variety of things. But I thought it was such a good idea to take a look at that and ask, because it allowed me to reflect back on the things that had happened, which I'd really not done for myself,
right, and
process it. And, death of a father, or trying to help care for a father, right, all those things that were part of a really hard year anyway. But I just thought that was a very good exercise. I love that will be looked at, for all.
Yeah, they were very sensitive to that. And in fact, for those faculty that were on a tenure track, the university as a whole moved everybody's clock out a year, just gave them an extra year if they wanted to take it.
Wonderful.
They didn't have to take it if they didn't want to, but they did. But, it's true that, and I'm so thankful that you brought that up, because the administration has been very sensitive to that. And one of the things that in my leadership classes and actually with my teams, I've always stressed is to let the person be the whole person. And I use that example. If their dog died that morning, when they come to work, their dog's still dead. And you have to let that whole person be there. And if you create a work environment where people can come as their whole selves, and there's not penalty for being authentic, and there's safe space when they do, you will get the best out of people, whether they're suffering something personally or not. You have to create a trusting environment, because that's how innovation happens.
Yes, it does.
Because if there's too much of a penalty for doing anything outside the norm, no innovation happens.
Yes, I totally agree with you. When that trust level goes up, there are studies that show then the ideas, innovation definitely go up as well. The creative energy is so much better. So I love that you said that. Speaking of innovation and creativity and trust, you, during your first few years here, have been involved in bringing in one of the largest gifts ever. And I just want to congratulate you as you're reflecting on your 3 years and looking at the things that you've done and moving forward. How is that affecting the school, and what was that like for you to be involved in such a wonderful gift for the university?
We're talking about the $60 million gift from Wilbur, from Billy and Ann Powers, which I just go out right on the record right now and saying I get no credit for that. I just didn't screw it up. The Powers have been wonderful friends of Clemson for a number of years and have been very supportive in a number of different ways. So this was absolutely not their first gift. This was their largest gift. We have an incredible development team. Our president was also involved in this. So as I say, I got the pleasure of being there for the ride. I just didn't scare them off, apparently. But we are so blessed. So now, in terms of how it impacts the college, which I'll start with how it impacts me, it is so cool to be the first name college at Clemson University.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, talk about hitting the sweet spot right. There's that thing that's like location. Talk about being in the right place at the right time. I mean, let's come to Clemson when there's a brand new building being built, which I also don't get any credit for. Bringing in the largest gift that Clemson has ever gotten in the naming of it, which I get no credit for, but I'm benefiting from. In, coming back from a pandemic, we've got the highest, the applications for our college are through the roof. This fall, our applications were up 82% from the year before.
That's amazing.
And this is where some colleges are trying to stay in business because kids are going like, well, I'm not, why bother to go in person? And it's up 82% this fall.
Amazing.
The quality continues to rise. We brought in 11 valedictorians. students from 40 states.
Mm-hmm.
We had 11% first generation admits, an increase in 10% on our diversity numbers, which we've worked very hard on the last couple of years.
Sure.
So it's just sort of like, whoa, this is like Alice in Wonderland right here.
Yeah.
Get to be in this place and get to benefit from all the enthusiasm. And there's just huge pride from the students. And that building, which is also partially made possible by the Powers gift, but also really a lot of alumni get a lot of credit for supporting that building and making very generous pledges before the first shovel of dirt was even turned.
Mm-hmm.
So that building was already in progress. And apparently they've been talking about it for about 30 years. So
yes.
Really glad that the last couple of years they could get that going. Yeah. So our alumni were supportive of this vision. And then the Powers gift is just icing on the cake because a good chunk of that gift goes to that paying for that building, but also their money enables support of faculty, scholarships for needy students, and also gives me the money to start some of these really innovative programs that we've started, like leadership, like business analytics. So there's just this building with this name on it. Pretty great name for business school, right? Powers?
Love it.
Love it. That one really worked. I like that a lot. It's just kind of all the perfect storm came together at one time. And it's like that giant building that's just this hub of energy and innovation and light and energy of everybody in it that's named, which raises us on a national profile, and all these so cool programs that are going on, and all this influx of great students that are thrilled to be there, feeling lucky they got in, with increasing diversity, both geographically and racially. And I just feel like we're just in a great spot right now. And I'm just so privileged to, my favorite line is that everybody else does all the work and I get all the credit. This is what I feel right now. It's like, I'm so thrilled to be here and have the privilege of leading this just amazing transformation that's happening and just raising the national stature of the entire university as well.
Wonderful. That's so exciting to hear you say that. And it has to affirm your decision 3 years ago when you were recruited. and this was really a different step for you in your journey. And I was reading the article recently, I think it was in Forbes, about you. I love that author, by the way. I always read his column, but just about you're bringing a fresh perspective and new eyes and right out of the business world, right out of Silicon Valley, right out of the heart of major corporations that you've worked for, startups that you've been involved with. And I know that makes for great stories in the classroom because we all learn best from stories. And so I'm sure you're sharing research and you're sharing other models and so forth, but having those business stories that you've lived and been in the center of, I just love that you bring that.
Well, I feel very blessed that I've had that background. And it's funny, this was not a conscious path by any means. You don't get to be dean of a college of business if you don't have a PhD. So I really applaud Clemson for being pretty brave for bringing in a non-traditional candidate. Because if it hadn't worked out, if I hadn't culturally been able to fit in or turned out I couldn't do this, there'd be a lot of people who go like, well, what did you expect to happen? She wasn't an academic and, she's not from the South. And in fact, she's worse. She's worse than a Northerner, she's from California for crying out loud, So it was a pretty brave choice of theirs, but I'll tell you, it was one of the best decisions I've ever made. Right up there among like number one and number two best decisions. And I've just been so really appreciative of how welcoming and supportive the Clemson community has been to me. And I kind of joke, but not so much, saying like, pretty sure in a former life I was a Southern lady. I really like it here. I really like it. Now all I need is a Southern gentleman, but I really like it down here. So I feel very blessed, and I'm glad people feel like I fit in here. I'm pretty adaptable. I'm pretty adaptable both in what I'm doing and where I'm doing it. I'm much more very consistent about just saying who I am. And it seems to be able to apply in the business world as well as academia. So I guess I got lucky.
Sure. And that's so important, being authentic. Tell me what gets you most excited every day when you get up.
Well, like I say, I love my job. It's hard to believe it's been 3 years. There's every once in a while there's a day that feels like it's been 33 years, but most of the time it feels like it's just been 3 days.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I love about my job is no day is ever the same, which is really good for me because I get bored easily. And so I really like multitasking. I like having a million balls in the air at once. And I never know what's going to happen. And the highlights of every day are running into somebody that gets excited about interacting, or I get to encourage.
Yes.
Or who comes up to me and says, wow, thank you for being here, because seeing you here means I can do it. I'd never really appreciated how important it is for people to see someone they could relate to.
Yes.
Because I didn't have those role models, right? I was too dumb and too arrogant to not do what I was going to do, right? But apparently it does make a difference, and it seems to make a difference to our female students in particular.
Yes.
And that's really that's very humbling, but very inspirational. And really, because it gets to the core need of we're just going to do true confessions on the radio right now, or on TV. I really need to be needed. I really need to feel like I'm making a difference. And so when I feel like I'm making a difference with people, particularly with people, then I get all sorts of energy out of that.
Yes.
So that's just a really cool part of my job, because when somebody actually finally dares to come and talk to me, they find out I'm actually really approachable and really appreciate it. It's one of the reasons I love working with the students and talking to the students. I really I go to talk to them to encourage them.
Absolutely. I love that you would say that, because I think that's a big part of what we do in education is encourage and say you can do this, which you said earlier, and then help them along that trajectory, which is life-changing many times when they get on the right path. And I do appreciate the fact that you brought up the importance of being able to see someone doing something that you hope you can do, but maybe you haven't necessarily. I think if women run companies or countries, they do so with a slightly different perspective. They make kind of different decisions. And so I think for our female students, it's really good to see women leaders and how they think about problems, how they solve for, how they manage their way through careers and so forth. So I personally am excited, very excited that you're at the helm for that reason. And I know I hear it from female students too. So that's sort of a passion of mine, to make sure that as we view entrepreneurial ideas, that we're doing it with maybe both male and female perspectives, because sometimes females might view an idea very differently, not just about the profit, but about what's good for the world.
Well, it's interesting that you brought that up, because I spoke to a group recently that's really trying to get more women into political positions, because I say this to women and anybody else: if you don't have a voice at the table, you don't have a seat at the table, you don't have a voice at the table. And I read some articles, and there's actual research that shows for the countries that were female-led during the pandemic and the U.S. states with female governors, they had statistically lower cases of positive COVID tests and deaths from COVID.
Interesting.
And so I think it isn't that women are great leaders and men aren't. I think that women may tend to use, and I read the research, and they haven't fully chased it down yet, but they're thinking that it's because these women leaders use some other metrics to make their policy decisions with. And so that'll be really interesting to see where that research goes.
Yes.
And the reason I'm very hopeful about that is because it doesn't mean that men can't lead with their heart. I think traditionally in the past, we've had this version of leadership, which was heavily male dominated, which stressed all of those things that got ascribed to a good leader, which were really telling men how they were supposed to act. Don't ever get emotional. Don't let people get in the way. Use your dollar metrics, those kinds of things. And I don't think that that's the best way for anybody to make a decision. And I have full faith that young men and men can lead with their hearts, can use people-based metrics as well. And I really believe that one of the things that we learned in this crisis one thing is we need to be a lot more flexible with everything.
Mm-hmm.
The way we approach everything, we have to be more flexible. There's a lot more degrees of freedom than we knew. And we all need to do a lot more listening. There's a lot more perspectives on everything than we have considered.
Mm-hmm.
And we are stronger when we do that.
Yes.
And so I've even had some male students come up and tell me that I'm an inspiration to them, which really gets me because, it makes sense to me if a woman says, oh, my mom and I love you. But to have a male student come and say, I had this recently and I almost cried, which I didn't really care if that looked professional or not. He said, I actually decided to come here because you're the leader here. And I was like,
love it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I don't take that as a brag point. I take that as let's model what it looks to be a leader, whether you're male or female, that leads with your heart. Because every team I've ever led is highly functional, highly productive. So it's not like we're substituting getting stuff done because we're acting personal.
No.
But we always used to have an awful lot of fun doing it too.
Yes.
Because people will bring their whole selves back to that innovation thing.
Yes, definitely. You're reminding me of the new book by the CEO of Netflix, and he talks about how he really became so much more aware of behavioral aspect of business when he and his wife went to marriage and family counseling, and he came back to his work and thought, I'm not doing any of these things at work, like saying I'm sorry, or I might have messed up over here.
Right.
I want to revisit this, and thank you for your patience with me, and some of the more social skills that Brene Brown is talking about.
Right.
We've had that military style leadership that a lot of companies hired from the academies, and that naturally happened. But I really love seeing us embrace more of the ability to be vulnerable and own our behaviors and teach that. And I do think women are naturally more relations oriented. I think that there's data to show that. And if you're a little bit more relational, sometimes that can be really a gift in business. And I think that I'm just so excited to hear you talking about your students actually coming up and saying, I'm a male, but I love that you're leading and I like how you lead. Well,
and whenever I talk to a group of women students that are particularly oriented around this being a female group, I say to them, men are not the enemy.
Never.
They're not that. They're not the. You have some that are a little less clued in at times, but that's just an awareness thing. In the same way that those of us that are not a minority need to be a little bit more clued into the fact that we can be clueless at times. And so it's back to this listening thing. And if there's any big tip I could give our male students to get ahead in the business world, it's develop your whole self in terms of, be the real person and be vulnerable and let people be themselves around you. And a lot of the students do that. I'm very encouraged with the male leaders that I work with too.
Absolutely. And I think empathy has really grown in our culture for male and female. And some of the experiences we've gone through in the last couple of years have brought some of that about as well. So I wanted to ask you, as you think about biggest challenges going forward, what would you say is out there that you're pondering? And
well, for the business school, my personal biggest challenge is always I want things to go faster than they do. That's just me. My ongoing challenge for the business school is to get enough resources to make the kind of progress with the opportunities that I see out there. There's so much that we can do. And everything is always a resource constraint. And I really don't mean to sound like I'm complaining with the $60 million gift that we got.
Right.
Because I'm not. I'm very, very grateful for that. And that gift has let us accelerate a lot of things that we're working on. But, it's always an issue of resources, and it's an issue of the ability to innovate. And I would love to be able to support my faculty better in many ways. We need more faculty to respond to the demand, the student demand. And the administration is providing us some more faculty, which I really do appreciate. So, just getting it, because I can see where we can go and I can see opportunities. And it's just that kind of getting there that I'm never really very patient about.
Yeah.
But that's just me.
Sure. And I guess as we were talking about being vulnerable and leadership and being authentic, What, as you think about your career, and if you were even speaking to your students, speaking about a time that maybe you failed and how you recovered, what would that look like?
Oh, okay. Talking about my how long have we got right now? Because like this several hours worth of stuff.
It's a therapy session.
It's therapy. So I'm going to get a bill for this, aren't I? I think if what we're trying to do is get some useful bit of wisdom out of my answer to this about how to recuperate from failure, which I assume is the reason that we're going there. I guess I would, rather than talk about a specific situation, although I can think of them right now, I think what I would do is talk more about my philosophy on failure.
Okay.
And that is, I don't know why, and I have ascribed this to being equal doses of ignorance and arrogance. I just don't worry about failure very much.
Yeah.
And so when I have failed at something, I don't really spend a whole lot of time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah, sometimes they hurt up front. But what I usually do with that, and you've heard me talk about this before, I just pivot.
Yeah.
Because it just is not in my constitution. I mean, this must be the pioneer DNA that I have.
Yes, that came to my mind.
We just don't give up.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like, I'm not going to lay down in the middle of the plains and just, bake to death. No, that's not an option, right? We're just going to somehow fix that stupid wooden, who thought of wooden wheels, Anyway, it's a pivot opportunity. And yes, I do try to learn from it. And occasionally it's humbling, which is probably really good with me. But to me, it's just a philosophy that I need to learn, I need to pivot. And part of the reason that it is actually possible for me to do that is I'm not afraid of change. And I also have no idea where that comes from. Now, it probably came from having a pretty good family foundation of encouraging and supporting me and enough wins that I kind of decided to define myself that way.
Sure.
So this is why being an encourager of other people is so important to me, because we always have the option to either be brought down by that failure or to pivot and move on. And people have you can't control the bad things that happen to you, but you can control what happens in your future and whether you carry those forward in the future. So that's kind of what I try to, talk about with the students, because they'll get all glazed over looking at my resume, and I'll go like, "Hey, folks, would you like to hear that I've actually been fired twice?" Because it's not bulletproof. It's not like I've never failed and everything I touch is just so easy. It's just I just don't let it stop me.
Yes.
And hopefully that's an encouragement for somebody. Yes. If they feel like they failed, to go like, oh, well, okay, I can get up and keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that you would add that part to that.
Yeah.
And so in the same vein, as we think about the last 3 years, and we obviously we talk a lot in our school about innovation, about creativity and applying it and innovating and changing and doing things differently, turning things upside down. What is it? How has your definition of innovation changed over the last 3 years? And I think you touched on a couple of things, but what does it mean to you now? How would you?
I think when people talk about the word innovation, particularly students might freak themselves out a little bit and say, well, innovation, I need to design a new satellite system or something. To me, the way I think about innovation is about changing things for the better.
Me too.
And so when I think about innovation, I guess I could go back and define all of these new programs that we're putting in place as innovation, and technically it is. Yeah. But to me, it was just like, oh, this would be really cool because this is something that would be really useful for our students, and it would make us better, and it would make our students more market relevant because it reflects the reality of what's going on in the business world. Yes. And so I don't spend a lot of time thinking about myself as an innovator as much, even though I do have a very entrepreneurial spirit. I just think about, okay, what do we need to do to be the best we can be? And what do our students need to be really highly relevant? So I think you've heard me talk about the mission of the business school being to graduate servant leaders equipped with 21st century business skills that can thrive and contribute to a dynamic global economy. And there's 3 parts of that are very specific. Of course, that's servant leadership, which we talked about, how passionate I am with that. 21st century business skills, this idea of what do our students need to graduate with to really be able to be market ready and to contribute. And I tell them, don't worry about getting your first job. Worry about you being able to say to somebody, here's how I'm going to contribute to your team.
Yes.
So I want our students graduating not only with a sense of leadership, but business analytics and sales and customer service and financial literacy and an entrepreneurial spirit. And that's what we've designed all these signature programs around. And they sit on top of their majors and digital and brand marketing. So really making them 21st century ready. And then that third part about a dynamic global economy. And that's picked very specifically too, because we are a global economy now. But more importantly, we are a very multicultural environment. And so when I say global, that doesn't mean just go overseas. That means understand that there are people who are as human as you and I are, who do things very differently, and it's okay. They have families and children too. And so one of the things that we taught in this leadership class this summer was cultural competence.
I love that.
All the faculty and the students went through the AFS cultural competency certificate. And we had negotiations run, and we did live negotiations with students in France. And so really this kind of being brave enough to step into the world as a global citizen.
Yes. And I want to make sure before we forget to do this, that you are sharing with our viewers a place where they can go and learn about this new leadership certificate program that you've put in place. Where do they, someone listening right now, where can they go and get that information? Yeah,
go to the College of Business website at Clemson, the Powers College of Business website. We'll have links to all of these their signature programs, this leadership certificate. And another thing to do that's kind of fun if you want to stay up with what's going on in the college is to subscribe to the newsstand. It's our electronic newsletter, basically, that comes out regularly. And we're always putting all of the cool stuff that we're innovating on that. We've launched a program called the Dean's Global Leadership Program, and we've got this leadership certificate, and our sales innovation program is going through the roof, and our brand and digital marketing is exciting. We're launching new programs, as you probably know, with your involvement with the MBA program. Next fall, we will have an MBA program that has an emphasis on branding and digital marketing.
Yes.
We already have MBA with innovation and entrepreneurship. We have one with business analytics. So we've got great graduate programs. We're actually even launching our first executive education program in leadership this summer.
Wonderful.
Next fall, we have a master's in marketing coming on. So we're always thinking about how can we innovate to serve both our students that have already graduated, our alumni, as well as get our students ready. So best place to keep up with us is online, where we just really keep all those stories going. And then, of course, they pepper my LinkedIn account all the time with all the stuff we're working on too.
Good. So looking at you and LinkedIn is a good way to kind of keep up with some of the things you're doing.
Right.
And could you talk a little bit about the global, Dean's Global Leadership? I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, this was a program that we started this summer, and I taught a section specifically on leadership, and we taught a session on negotiations. Judson John taught that class, and he's an expert negotiator, Harvard educated in negotiations, and just was great. And that negotiations capability was so important for our students, because people often enter into negotiations as a zero-sum game. And what Judson so aptly teaches our students is the goal in negotiations is to see how you can get everybody as much as you can of what they want. And it completely changes your idea of approaching it. And basically, if you stop to think about it, most of our day is a series of negotiations, even if it's one-on-one. And it's definitely selling the whole time. And it's definitely storytelling. So that was really valuable for the students. And then the cultural competency part that I told you about. And those classes, that class actually counts toward the leadership certificate. And our goal when the world opens up again is that we would have it be a 3-course where we would probably have a spring class that studies leadership and cultural issues. Then we would take a short overseas trip during the summer to exercise that and to look at different business models overseas. Wonderful. And then come back in the fall and do kind of a cornerstone type project.
What a nice bookend.
Yeah, this idea of academic, then really do in-field, and then in the fall do kind of something with it that's a leadership thing.
That's huge. It's very all-encompassing that you would have all those experiences.
Well, I'm really passionate about students actually studying outside their comfort zones. We used to just say overseas, but I'm looking at trying to get students west of the Mississippi at this point. But hopefully the world will open back up, and I'll be teaching in Oxford next summer on leadership. Wonderful. Which is we didn't get to do this last summer, so hopefully we'll get a chance to do that. And if I could wiggle my nose, I'd make funds available for every student to have some abroad, whatever that means, abroad study. Yeah.
It definitely, it's very important. I've read that that's part of your philosophy is that international exposure for so many times for students who maybe haven't even been out of the country. So I love that you're doing that and looking at business there, which is different, older, and they're looking for solutions too.
That's right.
I'm really excited to hear you say, as you were talking about the negotiation class and getting everyone together and getting everyone as much as possible of what they want. Sometimes an older model of teaching in MBAs has been more about annihilating competitors and getting ahead and doing and now I think many companies are more about co-working together, companies coming together and saying, you're good at this and we're good at that. We're competitors, but let's come together. Let's create something together. And I think that's really exciting when that can occur.
It's just a general philosophy I'd like our students to embrace, because I talk to them about the importance of a team that has a lot of different talents and skills and perspectives. And I'm sure they're quite tired of hearing me quote that proverb that I think is a very old proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together.
Yes.
And they kind of, nod at me like, And then I remind them of that exercise where you pretend that you're on a plane that crashes into the side of a mountain. Everybody survives, of course, but you have to figure out how you're going to survive and get your way out. And I said, do you really want to be on a plane where everybody has the exact same skill set? No, I don't want to be with all one of something. I want a doctor. I want an architect. I want an engineer. I want a navigator. I want a communicator. I want
a nurse.
I want a nurse. I want a solar reader or whatever. I want that diverse team. And when you make it a little more real, they go like, oh yeah, I see how that could come in handy.
Yeah, and that's a great illustration.
Yeah, it kind of helps people understand this concept of we really are stronger. And I really think that's true in terms of different perspectives and different, and that's true for different political groups, different geographic groups, different cultural groups. And I think, again, the big aha moment for me coming out of the pandemic is we need to listen more. I need to listen more and create that space for people to tell their stories.
Yes, because so many times they won't unless you open the space for them to do that or ask.
Right.
They won't. I know that you're always thinking. I know that you are always reading. You're meeting with so many different people. What are you curious about now?
Oh, wow. So many different things that are kind of all over the place. I'm very, very curious to read the research on COVID, the impact of that and the lessons from that when that comes out. I'm personally curious to try to wrap my head around Bitcoin. I had a conversation with somebody, and I really feel like that's just such an alien world for anything that I was raised with. I'd really like to try to understand that. And I'm just inspired by my grandfather, who was so willing to learn anything, even if he wasn't sure he was going to need it in his lifetime. I don't know if I've ever told you the story about when the Macs first came out, and he used to do typing. He was typing our family history, and the Mac came out, and he was really interested in it, and the mouse had just been invented, and he, what is that? I mean, and he just couldn't get how what his hand was doing here was going to change a cursor up on the screen.
Sure.
And I finally had this little brainstorm. I said, Grandpa, think of the mouse as a stick shift. You're just putting your hand on it and you're going to move it like you move a stick shift to get into the gear. And it just clicked with him.
Perfect.
And he goes, oh, okay, I get it. And he just embraced that. And I thought that was pretty cool. I don't know how old he was when he did that. I mean, he lived to 92, so he was probably in his 80s when he did that. And I just remember thinking, that's really cool. And I will continue to push myself to learn things that I don't know if they have any applicability in my life or not, but I never want to be one of those people that goes like, oh, that's new. I don't want to do that, right? So Bitcoin's on my list. I want to learn how to fly a drone because I think they're just so cool. And I've had a couple of students offer, and I've got to figure out if I can do that without like hurting something. So that's kind of exciting. I'm interested in that. I'm really, really passionate about this, creating a space in our college for people to tell their stories. Because there's been a lot of pain over the last year and a half in a lot of different ways. And I think the whole racial unrest and the whole political unrest has hit a lot of raw nerves at a time when people were very vulnerable and still feel vulnerable. And there were a lot of people that were hurt a lot worse than we were in terms of losing jobs or losing family. And you never know who's kind of hurting. Yeah. Because people hide that. Yes, they do. And so I really want to create that safe space. And when we can get back in an environment where we don't have to be masks and hiding behind that, and it's safe to be relatively close to people again, that's going to be a real area of focus for me too.
I like that.
And then I'm always trying to learn about the state because I never get to actually just go and sightsee and be a tourist here. I'm like, I go to cities and then I talk and then we leave. And so
you got to.
Yeah, I got to. So finally made it down to Folly Beach last August with my daughters and got to explore Charleston a little bit. I love Charleston. When I was at Southern Lady, it was probably Charleston I was born in. I'm just saying. But there's so much beauty here in the state. And also just the whole Southeast area is still on my to be explored list.
I think you just segued so beautifully into my next question, which was about how you juggle getting enough time with family, friends, and considering that you're running a business school to do some of these things. So that's a question I'm posing to you, and is how will you do that? Because that is so important, that part of it.
Yeah. It is for me, and I really do have a big cultural side of me that I really like. I really like the arts. I'm just so excited that the Peace Center is reopened. I've gone to my first play now. That felt like I was actually breathing in and out fully. So that's good, and really looking forward to getting back up into Greenville more and do that socially. My biggest challenge is being in two places at once. On any one day, there's probably multiple things I'm supposed to be at. And so sometimes I try to prioritize. Sure. I try to go to as many as I can. I try to really prioritize student events and faculty support events. I'm excited to start traveling again. I took my first business trip last week and spoke at a conference in Las Vegas, and that kind of felt like an out-of-body experience. But I really like travel. So that was kind of fun to do that.
What did you speak on?
Leadership, of course. It's a whole conference. That author that you referred to, Glenn Yopes, who writes for Forbes, also has a consulting group, and he is a very big proponent on this idea of leading in the age of personalization, which is based on this issue of needing to allow people to be themselves. Doesn't mean we don't have goals we want to get done, but really this back to when we crash the plane, let's bring the whole diverse team to try to get us out of this, right? And so he had a conference, and he honored me by having me speak at that conference. And I'm part of the consortium, which you can think of sort of as the board of directors for that movement nationally. And I will urge people to go and listen. It's now fully available online if you're interested in learning. And it brings leaders from healthcare, corporate, and academia, because we're all solving for the same problems. And so getting key leaders from all of those to talk about how we do that. And so that day and a half long, the full day of the conference is available in Pawdcast. And I was delighted to be able to announce at that conference, and I will announce now, that Clemson University and the Powers College of Business will be hosting this Leading in the Age of Personalization in 2022.
Congratulations. On-site. That's incredible.
It's really going to be fabulous. We're going to get to show off the new building. We're going to get to show off a lot of our thought leaders. The administration is being very supportive of us bringing that there. So stay tuned for that. But we'll really look forward to encouraging a lot of people. The speakers will be there in person, and it will be available in podcast interactively so that folks from across the nation can watch.
Wonderful. We'll definitely be on the lookout for that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I do want to ask you, what should I maybe have asked you, but I didn't?
Well, you haven't asked about my cat at all, and Gracie is. Gracie has actually really loved this pandemic.
Yes, she has.
She is not doing well with me. No, for those of you who don't know, Gracie is my old and cantankerous kitty who has. She's not very nice, but she's my not nice, and she's been my buddy through this whole transition, and so. Yeah, she's there. She's fine. She's just as mean as ever. Thank you. Thank you for asking.
But she's still pet therapy, right?
Actually, I'm her therapy, and she gets a little testy now that I go back to the office. But anyway, no, life is really good. I'm settled in, and just looking forward to getting out and getting to do more things with normal people again. And but I'm just feel very, very blessed to be here. Very blessed to be part of the Clemson community. Very blessed to be dean of the college.
Yes.
Blessed with our faculty and students, and I have an ace. We are a small but mighty dean's team, which I could not do my job without, and so I'm particularly blessed by
the dean circle that you're in.
Well, all the deans of the university are we really work as a very cooperative team.
I love that.
Yeah,
I do.
Yeah, we have breakfast together every month, and we did it even when we had to do it online. Although, the end of the bacon jokes about being online have just got to stop. So I'm very pleased to be part of that dean's group. I was also speaking about my very small but mighty dean's office staff, which basically consists of a very small group of people. But
you have good people in there. I know who you have.
You know who I'm talking about, and
yes, I do.
Could not do my job without them. So very, very blessed to do that. Great support from the provost and the president. So it's just it's a good thing I don't worry about failure, because it feels like there's nowhere to go but down right now. But I think I view it as there's nowhere to go but up. And we're making that progress. So everybody just follow us, support us, get excited for us, hire our students, give them internships, give me invitations to speak to your group, to encourage you on what we're doing, to encourage your employees on the importance of leadership, and that it can look like a lot of different things.
Thank you so much, Dean York. We're so grateful that you're here, and we appreciate all your work in the School of Business. And just thank you for making the time for the podcast today.
Oh, no. I always enjoy talking to you. You know that.
And we want you in Greenville more.
I'm coming back. I'm coming back.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.